A single scream pierced the silence of the New Mexico desert. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, broken sound that most people would have missed beneath the howl of the wind and the rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine. But Marcus Wolf Brennan wasn't most people. He'd spent 37 years learning to hear what others ignored. The crack in a voice that meant danger, the silence that screamed louder than words, the desperate cry of someone who'd given up hope that anyone was listening. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late August when Wolf's motorcycle roared into the parking lot of Lucky's Gas and Go, a forgotten speck of civilization on Highway 54 between Carrizozo and Alamogordo. The place looked like it had been abandoned by time itself, faded red paint peeling from wooden siding, a neon sign that only half worked, gas pumps so old they still had mechanical dials. Tumbleweeds gathered in the corners of the lot, and the heat rising from the cracked asphalt made the air shimmer like water. The temperature gauge on Wolf's bike read 104 degrees. The kind of heat that made leather stick to skin, that turned metal too hot to touch, that sucked moisture from your mouth before you could even swallow. Desert heat, unforgiving and absolute. Wolf killed his engine and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. The sudden absence of the Harley's rumble was almost painful. For 6 hours, that steady thunder had been his companion, drowning out thoughts he didn't want to think, memories he couldn't quite outrun. Now, in the silence, they came creeping back. Albuquerque, the fight with his ex-girlfriend, the bottle of whiskey he'd almost bought, the moment he'd chosen to ride instead of drink, choosing the lesser of two self-destructive behaviors. He was a big man, 6'3", with the kind of build that came from hard living and harder lessons. 240 pounds. Most of it muscle earned through decades of manual labor, prison workouts, and the kind of street fights that left permanent marks. His hands, resting on the handlebars, were scarred across the knuckles. Old fights, old lessons written in scar tissue. His leather vest bore the patch of the Iron Covenant MC, a smaller club that had earned respect through loyalty and an unbreakable code. Protect the innocent, no matter the cost. His arms were covered in tattoos, some professional, some crude prison ink that told stories he'd rather forget. A thick beard, more gray than black now, covered a jaw that had been broken twice. His eyes, dark and weathered, carried the weight of things he'd seen and things he'd done. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And please, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter, and your support helps us keep telling them. The gas station seemed deserted. Wolf noticed the absence of other vehicles immediately, a survival instinct honed over decades. The convenience store's windows were grimy, making it impossible to see inside. A handwritten, "Open" sign hung crooked in the door, moving slightly in the desert breeze. Wolf dismounted, his boots crunching on gravel and broken glass. The sun was merciless, turning the metal of his bike too hot to touch. He'd been riding for 6 hours straight, running from memories in Albuquerque, heading nowhere in particular because nowhere was better than standing still with his thoughts. That's when he heard it again. A sound so faint it could have been the wind, could have been his imagination, could have been nothing at all. But it wasn't nothing. Wolf's entire body went still, his head tilting slightly as he tried to pinpoint the source. It was coming from the side of the building, near the bathrooms. The kind of gas station bathrooms that required a key attached to a wooden block the size of a brick, the kind that people avoided unless they were truly desperate. The crying was soft, rhythmic, broken by gasps that sounded like someone trying very hard not to make noise. Wolf had heard crying before, in prison cells, in hospital rooms, in the middle of the night when ghosts came calling. This was different. This was the sound of a child who'd learned that crying too loud brought worse things than silence. Wolf's jaw tightened. His hands, scarred and rough, curled into fists at his sides. He moved toward the sound, his boots heavy on the concrete, his shadow long and dark in the afternoon sun. The men's bathroom door was closed but unlocked. A rusted sign read, "Out of order," but the tape holding it up had mostly peeled away. Wolf pushed the door open slowly, the hinges screaming in protest. A sound that echoed off the stained tiles like a warning, like the building itself was trying to tell him to turn back, to leave, to not see what waited inside. The smell hit him first, urine, mold, and beneath it all, fear. Not the abstract concept of fear, but the actual scent of it, sweat gone sour with terror, the metallic tang of blood, the particular smell of a child who'd been crying for hours. Wolf had smelled it before. In prison, in war zones, in the aftermath of domestic violence calls he'd witnessed. It was a smell that spoke of suffering so acute it became physical. The bathroom was small, claustrophobic, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. The walls were covered in graffiti, crude drawings, phone numbers for services that probably didn't exist anymore, racial slurs carved deep into the drywall with keys or knives. The single window was painted over, probably decades ago, letting in only dim, filtered light that made everything look underwater, drowned in shadows. A fluorescent bulb overhead flickered arrhythmically, buzzing like angry insects trapped in glass. The sink was rust-stained and filled with stagnant water that looked like it had been there for days, maybe weeks. Cigarette butts floated on the surface. The faucet dripped steadily, a hypnotic rhythm that had probably been driving the child insane. The toilet was missing its seat, the bowl stained brown and black with decades of neglect. Toilet paper, or what remained of it, hung from a broken dispenser, the paper water-damaged and useless. But it was the floor that made Wolf's stomach turn. Dirty didn't begin to describe it. The tile was cracked and missing in places, revealing water-stained concrete underneath. Dark stains spread across the surface, old and new, organic and chemical, an archaeological record of every terrible thing that had happened in this forgotten space. And there, curled up on that filthy floor next to the exposed pipe beneath the sink, was the source of the crying. A child. The word didn't do justice to what Wolf saw. This wasn't a child in the way you picture children, laughing, playing, full of energy and innocence. This was a broken thing, a small human who'd been shattered and was barely holding the pieces together. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, though malnutrition might have made him smaller than his actual age. His dark hair was matted to his head with sweat and tears and dirt, plastered against his skull in wet clumps that suggested he'd been here for hours, maybe since morning. His clothes, a dinosaur t-shirt that might have been bright blue once, but was now faded to gray, and jeans that were 2 sizes too big, were dirty and torn. The t-shirt had a rip along the collar, as if someone had grabbed him there, hard. His left wrist was handcuffed to the exposed pipe beneath the sink, the metal cutting into his small wrist where he'd pulled against it. The skin around the cuff was raw and bleeding, fresh blood mixing with dried blood mixing with rust from the pipe. His arm was extended at an awkward angle, probably had been for hours, the muscles cramping and screaming from being held in an unnatural position for too long. But it was his face that broke something in Wolf's chest. The boy's face was streaked with tears and snot. Not fresh tears, but the kind that had dried and been replaced and dried again, creating layers like geological strata, each one marking another wave of terror, another moment of realizing no one was coming, another prayer that had gone unanswered. His brown eyes were swollen, nearly shut from crying, red-rimmed and bloodshot, and filled with a fear so profound it seemed to have hollowed him out from the inside. For a moment, neither of them moved. The child's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Wolf could see the thoughts racing behind those terrified eyes. Is this person here to help? Is this person here to hurt me? Should I scream? Should I stay silent? Wolf slowly lowered himself into a crouch, making himself smaller, less threatening. He'd learned this in prison, teaching younger inmates how to survive without becoming prey. Make yourself smaller. Keep your hands visible. Move slow. Hey there, buddy, Wolf said, his voice rough from cigarettes and too many years of holding things in, but deliberately gentle. My name's Marcus. I'm not going to hurt you. The boy's crying intensified, his whole body shaking. He pulled harder against the handcuff, the pipe creaking under the strain. Easy, easy, Wolf continued, staying in his crouch. I'm here to help, okay? What's your name? The boy opened his mouth, but only a sob came out. He looked younger than 8 now, shrunken and fragile in a way that made Wolf's chest tight with rage. Wolf's eyes scanned the scene, his mind cataloging details the way he'd learned in the military before everything went to hell. The handcuff was real, not a toy, police grade, the kind you couldn't pick with a bobby pin. The boy's wrist was raw, blood mixing with rust on the metal. There was an empty juice box on the floor and a granola bar wrapper. Someone had left him supplies, which meant this wasn't a kidnapping in the traditional sense. Then Wolf saw it. Tucked partially under the boy's leg, protected from the filthy floor, was a piece of paper folded multiple times. The edge was visible, and even from his position, Wolf could see writing on it. "Is that a note, buddy?" Wolf asked softly, pointing. The boy's eyes darted to the paper, then back to Wolf. He nodded once, a jerky, terrified movement. "Can I see it?" Another nod. The boy shifted, wincing as the handcuff bit deeper into his wrist, and pulled the paper out with his free hand. He held it toward Wolf, his arm shaking so badly the paper rattled. Wolf took it carefully, his fingers gentle. "Thank you. You're doing real good, okay? You're brave. So brave." He unfolded the paper. It was lined notebook paper, the kind you'd tear from a child's school composition book. The writing was rushed, desperate, with words crossed out and rewritten. But it was the message that made Wolf's blood run cold. The note. The handwriting was a woman's, cramped and frantic. "To whoever finds him. His name is Daniel Santos. He's 8 years old. His birthday is March 15th. He likes dinosaurs and SpongeBob and his mom. That's me. I'm his mom. I know what this looks like. I know you're going to think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But I need you to understand, I didn't have a choice. Not anymore. 3 months ago, I borrowed money from the wrong people. I was desperate. My son needed medicine for his asthma, and I'd lost my job, and I was behind on everything, and they said it would be easy money, just one delivery. I was so stupid. It wasn't one delivery. It became 10, then 20. Then they told me what I was really delivering wasn't packages. It was drugs. And then it became worse. So much worse. They said if I tried to leave, they'd take Daniel. They said they had uses for little boys. They showed me pictures of what happened to kids whose parents didn't cooperate. I can't unsee those pictures. I wake up screaming every night. I did things. Terrible things. Things I can never take back. I helped them because every day I helped them was one more day Daniel was safe. But then they told me they needed him anyway. They said there were buyers. Buyers for my son. I can't let that happen. I won't. So I brought him here and I handcuffed him to this pipe, because if he's stuck here, they can't take him. Someone will find him. Someone good. Someone who'll call the police. Someone who'll protect him when I can't anymore. By the time you read this, I'll be turning myself in. I'm going to the FBI in Albuquerque. I'm going to tell them everything about the operation, about the houses where they keep the children, about all of it. They'll arrest me. I'll go to prison for the rest of my life. I know that. I accept that. But Daniel will be safe. Please, please, don't let them find him first. There are 3 houses in Alamogordo where they keep children. Children who look like Daniel. Children whose parents weren't brave enough to handcuff them to pipes. The addresses are 2847 Desert View Road, 156 Cactus Lane, 891 Sunset Boulevard. The man in charge is called Santos. He drives a black Escalade. License plate, NM AX7-943. He comes to check the houses every Tuesday and Thursday. Today is Tuesday. I've left my son here because I know someone will find him. I know someone will protect him. I'm begging you, don't just call the police about Daniel. Tell them about the other children. Tell them about the houses. Tell them about Santo. Save them all. Tell Daniel his mama loves him more than anything. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I did this because I love him, not because I wanted to leave him. Tell him every single day of handcuffing him here was better than one day of what they wanted to do to him. Please don't let my son grow up thinking his mother abandoned him. I'm saving him the only way I know how. Maria Santos. P.S. The key to the handcuffs is taped under the sink in the women's bathroom. I couldn't leave it too close. They might come looking. Wolf read the note 3 times, his hands shaking harder with each word. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Daniel watched him with those enormous, terrified eyes, not knowing what the note said, not understanding why this giant, scary-looking man had tears streaming into his beard. Wolf looked up at the child, at Daniel, and saw every kid he'd ever failed, every call for help he'd ignored when he was younger and stupider, and thought the world owed him something instead of the other way around. "Daniel," Wolf said, his voice cracking, your mama loves you very much. Do you understand that?" Daniel nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "She did this to protect you, not to hurt you, to protect you." Wolf folded the note carefully and put it in his pocket. "I'm going to get you out of here, buddy, but I need to get that key first. Can you be brave for just a little bit longer? Is my mama coming back?" Daniel's voice was so small, so broken. Wolf couldn't lie. He wouldn't. Your mama had to go do something really important, something to help a lot of other kids. But she made sure you'd be safe first. You're her hero, Daniel. You know that. You're so brave. Wolf stood, every muscle in his body coiled tight with rage and purpose. He had maybe an hour, maybe less, before Santos' Tuesday check-in. He had 3 addresses and a child handcuffed to a pipe. He had a note that described horrors he'd spent years trying to forget existed. He had work to do. But first, he needed to make a call. Because one man, no matter how determined, couldn't take down a trafficking operation. But a brotherhood? A brotherhood could move mountains. Wolf pulled out his cell phone. No signal. Of course. This godforsaken place probably hadn't seen reliable cellular service since the Clinton administration. Daniel, I'll be right back. I promise. I'm going to get that key and then I'm going to get help. You're not alone anymore, buddy. You hear me? You're not alone. Wolf moved fast, his boots echoing in the empty bathroom. He crossed to the women's bathroom, pushed open the door. It was identical to the men's, filthy, abandoned, forgotten. He dropped to his knees, reaching under the sink. His fingers found the key taped to the underside of the porcelain. Relief flooded through him, so intensely his hands shook as he peeled it free. But as he stood, pocketing the key, he heard something that made his blood turn to ice. The rumble of a vehicle pulling into the parking lot. A big vehicle. The deep growl of a premium engine. Wolf moved to the small, grimy window and peered out. A black Escalade. License plate, NM, AX7-943. Santos had arrived early. Wolf's past. To understand what Marcus Wolf Brennan did next, you need to understand who he was. Not the man with the leather vest and the motorcycle. Not the biker with the Iron Covenant patch. But the boy who'd come before. Marcus Brennan grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a neighborhood where survival meant knowing which streets to avoid after dark and which faces meant trouble even in daylight. His father left when Marcus was 3, heading to Arizona for work that never materialized. His mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs, days at a laundromat, nights cleaning office buildings downtown, just to keep them in a 1-bedroom apartment with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors' arguments and prayers in equal measure. Marcus was 9 when his mother brought home Eduardo. Eduardo was charming at first, the way predators always are. He had money for new shoes, for McDonald's dinners, for the PlayStation Marcus had wanted for 2 Christmases. He called Marcus Mijo and ruffled his hair and told Carmen she was beautiful even in her work uniform. The abuse started slowly. A slap for talking back, a shove for leaving toys out, then closed fists, then worse, much worse. Marcus learned to be silent, learned to make himself small, learned that screaming only made it last longer. He learned that his mother chose Eduardo over him again and again because she was too scared, too tired, too broken to choose anything else. When Marcus was 12, he fought back for the first time. Eduardo had been beating his mother in the kitchen, and Marcus grabbed a frying pan and swung it with everything he had. The satisfying crack of metal against skull. Eduardo's surprise. The moment of power. Eduardo put him in the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. The doctors asked questions. Marcus lied. His mother lied. Eduardo smiled and said Marcus was a troubled kid, always getting into fights. The system believed them because the system always believes the adults with jobs and apartments and convincing faces. At 16, Marcus ran away. He slept in abandoned buildings, stole food from gas stations, survived by being meaner and harder than everyone else. He learned to fight, really fight, not the playground scuffles of childhood, but the brutal calculus of fists and fury that determined who ate and who went hungry. At 18, he joined the army, lying about his record, desperate for structure and purpose and somewhere to belong. He was good at it. The discipline, the clear rules, the sense of mission. He did 2 tours in Iraq, saw things that made his childhood seem quaint by comparison, came home with medals and nightmares and a rage he couldn't name. The transition to civilian life destroyed him. He couldn't hold a job, couldn't hold a relationship, couldn't sleep through the night without waking up swinging at ghosts. He started drinking, then fighting, then stealing. A bar fight landed him in prison for 18 months. Assault with a deadly weapon, though the weapon was just his fists and the man he'd beaten had been harassing a waitress who'd said no. Prison taught him things the military hadn't. It taught him about codes, about brotherhoods built not on nationality or duty, but on loyalty and survival. It taught him that sometimes the most dangerous men were the ones society had already written off, which meant they had nothing left to lose. He met Reaper in prison. James Reaper McKenzie, president of the Iron Covenant MC, was doing time for weapons charges that everyone knew were bullshit. He'd been carrying firearms that were legal, but the DA had needed to make an example of someone, and bikers made good examples. Reaper was different from anyone Marcus had known. He was older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and tattoos that told stories of decades lived hard, but lived with purpose. He didn't posture, didn't need to prove anything. He just was. You fight like a man who's trying to kill himself, but hasn't figured out how yet, Reaper told Marcus one day in the yard, after Marcus had beaten 3 men for looking at him wrong. So, Reaper said, that's a waste of good rage. You want to throw your life away fighting ghosts? Fine. But you could also use that rage for something that matters. Like what? Like protecting people who can't protect themselves. Like being the person you needed when you were a kid. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent 20 years running from that scared 9-year-old boy with the broken ribs. Running from the memory of crying while Eduardo laughed. Running from his mother's turned back and the system's blind eye. When Marcus got out of prison, Reaper was waiting. You want in? We ride for a cause. We protect women and kids. We handle problems the law can't or won't touch. You break the code, you're out. You stay loyal, your family. Marcus said yes. That was 12 years ago. In those 12 years, Marcus, now Wolf, a road name given because of his lone wolf tendencies and his habit of howling at the moon when drunk, had found something he'd never had before: purpose. The Iron Covenant wasn't like the big clubs that made headlines for trafficking and violence. They were smaller, more focused. They ran interference for domestic violence shelters, providing security when vengeful exes came calling. They escorted women escaping dangerous situations across state lines. They'd even broken up trafficking operations before, though usually they just gathered intel and passed it to law enforcement. But this was different. Wolf stood in that filthy gas station bathroom, the key to Daniel's handcuffs in one pocket, Maria's note in the other, and he felt that old rage burning in his chest. Not the directionless fury of his youth, but something sharper, more focused. He thought about every time someone had failed to help him. Every adult who'd seen the bruises and looked away. Every teacher, cop, social worker, neighbor who'd chosen comfort over courage. He thought about Maria Santos, a mother so desperate to save her son that she'd handcuffed him to a pipe and turned herself into the FBI. He thought about the children in those 3 houses. Children who looked like Daniel. Children whose parents weren't brave enough or weren't able to do what Maria had done. And he thought about Santos, pulling into the parking lot right now in his black Escalade, checking his operation, counting his inventory. His human inventory. Wolf had spent 37 years becoming exactly the kind of man the world feared. The kind of man decent people crossed the street to avoid. The kind of man who knew how to hurt people, how to make them afraid, how to break things that needed breaking. Maybe it was time to be that man for the right reasons. Wolf moved back to where Daniel waited, still handcuffed, still terrified. He knelt down, keeping his voice calm even though every muscle in his body was coiled for violence. Daniel, I need you to listen very carefully. There's a bad man outside. A very bad man. But I'm not going to let him get anywhere near you. Do you understand? Daniel nodded, his eyes impossibly wide. I'm going to unlock these handcuffs. Then I'm going to take you to my motorcycle. You're going to sit on it and wait for me. If anyone comes near you who isn't me, you scream as loud as you can. Can you do that? Where are you going? Wolf's smile was cold, predatory. I'm going to make sure that bad man never hurts anyone again. He unlocked the handcuffs. Daniel's wrist was raw and bleeding, the metal having cut deep. Wolf winced, remembering his own scars, his own pain. He scooped the boy up. Daniel weighed nothing, all bones and fear, and moved quickly through the bathroom door. The gas station was still empty. The Escalade sat near the pumps, engine running, windows tinted. Wolf couldn't see inside. He carried Daniel to his motorcycle, set him on the seat. Stay here. Don't move. I'll be back in 5 minutes. What if you don't come back? Wolf met those terrified eyes. Then you call 911. You tell them everything. You tell them about your mama's note. You tell them about the houses. You understand? Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Wolf pressed his keys into the boy's hand. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you take my bike and you ride. You don't know how? Doesn't matter. You'll figure it out. You're brave, remember? Your mama made you brave. Wolf turned toward the Escalade. His hands were steady. His heart rate was slow. This was what he'd been training for his whole life without knowing it. Every beating he'd survived. Every fight he'd won and lost. Every lesson the streets and the military and prison had taught him. All of it had been preparing him for this moment. The Escalade's door opened. A man stepped out. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. He was maybe 40, with slick back hair and the kind of face that smiled when it hurt people. Santos. He saw Wolf immediately. Saw the leather vest, the Iron Covenant patch, the tattooed arms. His hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun Wolf knew would be there. Wolf was faster. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides, his right fist connecting with Santos' jaw before the man could clear his weapon. Santos went down hard, his expensive watch scraping across the asphalt. Wolf was on him before he could recover, one knee on Santos' chest, his hand wrapped around the man's throat. How many? Wolf growled. How many kids in those houses? Santos tried to fight, clawing at Wolf's hand. Wolf squeezed harder. Tell me, or I crush your windpipe right here. How many? Foo, fuck you. Wrong answer. Wolf shifted his weight, driving his knee harder into Santos' sternum. He heard a rib crack. Good. I've got a little boy over there who was handcuffed to a pipe because his mama was so scared of you, she did the unthinkable. I've got 3 addresses of houses full of kids you're selling like property. I've got nothing to lose and a whole lot of rage. So I'll ask one more time. How many? Santos' face was turning purple, his eyes bulging. Wolf eased up just enough to let him breathe. 13, Santos gasped. Across 3 houses. Wolf's vision went red. 13 children. 13 lives stolen. 13 families destroyed. Names. I want their names. I don't know all. Wolf's fist came down again, breaking Santos' nose. Blood sprayed across the cracked asphalt. Lie to me again. See what happens. Santos was crying now, this man who sold children, blubbering like the coward he was. He started talking, words tumbling out between sobs and gasps. Names. Ages. How long they'd been there. Wolf memorized every word. This was evidence. This was justice. In the distance, he heard sirens. Someone must have seen the Escalade pull in and called. Or maybe Maria had already turned herself in and the FBI was moving. Either way, help was coming. But Wolf wasn't done yet. He pulled Santos to his feet, slammed him against the Escalade. You're going to tell them everything. Every name, every location, every person involved. You understand? Santos nodded frantically. Because if you don't, Wolf leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper that promised violence. I will find you. I don't care what prison they put you in. I don't care how many protective custody units you hide in. I know people inside. A lot of people. And they owe me favors. Wolf released him, let him slide down the side of the Escalade. Santos sat there, bleeding and broken, no longer the predator, but the prey. Wolf walked back to his motorcycle, to where Daniel sat watching with wide eyes. The boy had stayed, hadn't run, even though Wolf had given him the option. Brave kid, just like his mama said. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights flashed on the horizon. Wolf knelt in front of Daniel. The police are coming. They're the good guys. You're safe now. What about you? I'll be fine. I've got a good lawyer. Wolf smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You remember what I told you? About your mama? Daniel nodded. Good. Don't you ever forget it. She's a hero. So are you. The first police car screeched into the parking lot, followed by 2 more. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting commands. Wolf raised his hands slowly, fingers spread, no threat. He'd done this dance before. My name is Marcus Brennan, he called out, voice steady. I've got a child here who needs medical attention. The man by the Escalade has information about a trafficking operation. I've got a note from the boy's mother with addresses and details. Nobody else is in danger. A female officer approached cautiously, her weapon still drawn but lowering. She was young, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes that took in the scene quickly. The injured boy, the bleeding man by the Escalade, Wolf's raised hands. Sir, I need you to get on your knees, hands behind your head. Wolf complied. He knew the drill. As they cuffed him, he kept his eyes on Daniel. You're okay now, buddy. Tell them everything. Show them your mama's note. Another officer, older, with sergeant stripes, approached Daniel carefully. Hey there, son. Are you hurt? Can you tell me your name? Daniel Santos, the boy whispered. My mama handcuffed me to the pipe to keep me safe. The sergeant's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to fury in the space of a heartbeat. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, we need multiple ambulances and child services at this location. We also need FBI. This is bigger than we thought. The Brotherhood arrives. 20 minutes later, as EMTs worked on Daniel's wrist and detectives questioned Santo, Wolf sat in the back of a police cruiser, still handcuffed but not under arrest. Not yet, anyway. The female officer who'd first approached, Officer Sarah Chun, according to her name tag, stood by the open door, taking his statement with a careful professionalism that Wolf respected. So let me get this straight, Chun said, reviewing her notes. You stopped for gas, heard crying, found the boy handcuffed, read the mother's note, and then confronted Santo when he arrived? That's correct. And you assaulted Santo before police arrived? Wolf met her eyes. I restrained a suspected human trafficker who was reaching for a weapon. If that's assault, charge me. But those 13 kids in those houses don't have time for legal nuance. Chin's lips pressed into a thin line. She'd already called in the addresses from Maria's note. Units were mobilizing across Alamogordo right now, converging on those 3 houses. Mr. Brennan, you understand you could have been killed. This man is dangerous. His organization is dangerous. Officer Chun, Wolf said quietly, I've been dangerous my whole life. First time it's been for something that matters. Before Chun could respond, a new rumble filled the air. Deeper than police engines. Rhythmic. Multiple motorcycles, moving fast. Wolf smiled. That'll be my brothers. Chin's hand moved to her weapon. How many? Chapter's got about 30 members. Probably all of them. This isn't. They're here to help, Wolf interrupted. We protect kids. It's what we do. The motorcycles appeared on the horizon, a wall of chrome and leather moving like a single organism. They pulled into the parking lot in formation, engines cutting off in sequence. The Iron Covenant MC had arrived. Reaper dismounted first, his gray beard braided, his Iron Covenant president patch catching the afternoon sun. He was flanked by Hammer, the club's sergeant-at-arms, a massive man with hands like concrete blocks, and Doc, their treasurer, who actually was a doctor before he got his medical license suspended for treating patients who couldn't afford insurance. Officer, Reaper said, approaching Chun with his hands visible and non-threatening. My name is James McKenzie. Marcus is one of our brothers. We're here to support him and to offer any assistance with the children you're about to recover. Chun looked overwhelmed. This is a police matter. With respect, Reaper interrupted smoothly. It's about to be a child welfare matter, and we've got experience there. We've worked with shelters and CPS across 3 states. We know how to handle traumatized kids. We know how to provide security. And we know how to make sure those houses get cleared properly. More police cars arrived, along with SUVs marked FBI. A man in a dark suit climbed out of one, barking orders into his phone. He looked important, the kind of important that made local cops step aside. The FBI agent, who introduced himself as Special Agent Marcus Rivera, took control of the scene with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. He listened to Chin's rundown, read Maria's note, which Wolf had handed over immediately, and made 3 phone calls that mobilized what seemed like half of New Mexico's law enforcement. Mr. Brennan, Rivera said, approaching the police cruiser where Wolf still sat, cuffed. You've created quite a situation here. I found a situation. I just dealt with it. Rivera studied him with eyes that had seen every kind of criminal and hero and everything in between. Maria Santos turned herself into our Albuquerque office this morning. She's been debriefed and is currently providing extensive information about this operation. Your actions here, he paused, are probably the only reason she's still alive. Santos' people were planning to kill her before she could testify. You taking Santo down gives us leverage. He's already asked for a lawyer and protection. He's scared, which means he'll talk. What about the kids? The 13 he said were in those houses. Rivera's expression darkened. We're moving on those locations now. If the intel is accurate, we'll have them secured within the hour. I want to be there, Wolf said. That's not. I know it's not protocol. But those kids are going to be scared out of their minds when you breach those doors. They're going to see more men with guns and authority, more people who might hurt them. You need someone who isn't a cop, isn't official. Someone they can see as different, as safe. Reaper stepped forward. Agent Rivera, our club has experience with trauma cases. We've worked search and rescue. We've provided security for women's shelters. We've been consultants for 3 different CPS offices. We're not vigilantes. We're just people who give a damn. Rivera considered this, weighing protocols against pragmatism. Finally, he nodded. You ride with us. You follow our commands exactly. You don't enter until we've secured the location. And you speak to the children only if our child psychologist approves. Clear. Crystal, Wolf and Reaper said in unison. Chin unlocked Wolf's handcuffs. Don't make me regret this. Wolf rubbed his wrists. You won't. As the strike teams assembled, a coordinated effort between FBI, local police, state police, and now, unexpectedly, the Iron Covenant MC. Wolf walked over to where paramedics had Daniel sitting in the back of an ambulance. The boy's wrist was bandaged, his face clean of tears, but his eyes still carried that haunted look. Daniel, Wolf said gently, I've got to go help some other kids. Kids like you. But I want you to know something. The boy looked up at him. Your mama was the bravest person I've ever met. What she did, leaving you here, that wasn't abandonment. That was love. The fiercest kind of love there is. She sacrificed everything so you could be safe. Don't you ever forget that. Will I see her again? Wolf wouldn't lie. I don't know, buddy. She did things she had to do to keep you alive. The law's going to have to sort through that. But I promise you this. I'll make sure everyone knows what she did. I'll make sure they understand she was a hero, not a criminal. Okay. Daniel nodded, fresh tears streaming down his face. Wolf squeezed his shoulder gently. You're going to be okay, Daniel Santos. You're going to have a good life. Because your mama made sure of it. As Wolf walked back to his bike, preparing to follow the FBI convoy to the first house, he felt something shift inside him. That old rage was still there, but it wasn't eating him alive anymore. It was fuel now. Purpose. Reaper fell into step beside him. Hell of a day. It's not over yet. No, Reaper agreed. But we're going to finish it. Together. The Iron Covenant MC formed up behind the police vehicles, engines roaring to life. 30 bikers, all wearing their patches, all ready to help save children they'd never met. As they rolled out, Wolf thought about 9-year-old Marcus, curled up in that hospital bed with broken ribs, wishing someone, anyone, would fight for him. Today, finally, he was fighting for that little boy, and for every other child who'd ever needed someone to stand up when it mattered most. The convoy headed south, toward Alamogordo, toward 3 houses that held 13 stolen lives, toward justice, or something like it, piecing together the truth. The first house on Maria's list, 2847 Desert View Road, looked like every other house in this faded neighborhood. Single-story, beige stucco, a front yard of gravel and struggling cacti, a rusted chain-link fence, the kind of place you'd drive past 1,000 times without noticing. That was the point, Wolf realized. These operations hid in plain sight, counting on neighbors to mind their own business and police to have bigger fish to fry. The FBI's tactical team moved with practiced precision, surrounding the house, blocking exits, establishing a perimeter. Agent Rivera coordinated from a mobile command center that had been set up 2 blocks away. Wolf and the Iron Covenant waited at the perimeter, as instructed, watching the professionals work. Breach in 5, someone said over the radio. Wolf's hands gripped his motorcycle's handlebars so tight his knuckles went white. Somewhere in that house were children. Children who'd been stolen, bought, sold. Children whose parents either didn't know where they were or were too scared to report it. FBI. Search warrant. The call came over the radio, followed by the crash of a door breaking. 30 seconds of chaos. Shouting. Movement. Then, for juveniles recovered. All alive. Requesting medical immediately. Wolf let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. 4 out of 13. 9 more to go. The second house was 3 blocks away, 156, Cactus Lane. Similar story. Unremarkable house, quiet street, horror hidden behind closed doors. This one yielded 5 children, all under 12, all malnourished and terrified. The third house, 891, Sunset Boulevard, should have been the last. Maria's note had listed 3 addresses. But when the FBI breached this one and found 4 more children, the oldest, a 13-year-old girl named Rosa, told them something that made Agent Rivera's blood run cold. "There's another house," Rosa said, her voice barely a whisper as FBI agents wrapped her in a blanket. "One they don't tell new kids about. The bad house, where they take kids who fight back too much." Rivera keyed his radio. "We need Santos in interrogation now. We've got a fourth location we didn't know about." Santos, already in custody and facing life in prison, was being transported to FBI headquarters in Albuquerque. He'd asked for a deal, information for a reduced sentence, protective custody, relocation after prison. Rivera had been noncommittal. Let him sweat. But now they needed him to talk, and they needed it yesterday. Wolf approached Rivera at the mobile command center. "Let me talk to him." "That's not protocol." "Nothing about today is protocol," Wolf interrupted. "You've got 13 kids safe. But there's more in that fourth house, and Santo knows where it is. You can interrogate him by the book, wait for lawyers, play the game. Or you can let someone who's not bound by professional standards have 5 minutes." Rivera should have said no. Every regulation, every protocol, every rule in the FBI handbook said no. But he'd seen the children they'd just rescued. He'd seen their bruises, their fear, their broken trust in anything good. And he'd seen Wolf with Daniel, gentle and patient, and somehow exactly what that traumatized child needed. "You've got 5 minutes, Rivera said. "But if you lay a hand on him." "I won't," Wolf promised. "Don't need to." Santo was being held in the back of a police van, separated from the general prisoner transport. When Wolf climbed in, the man flinched, pressing himself against the far wall. "Remember me?" Wolf asked, his voice calm, conversational. Santo's nose was splinted, his face purple with bruises. He nodded frantically. "Good. Then you remember what I told you about telling them everything." Wolf sat down across from him, the space between them tight and claustrophobic. "They found 13 kids. You're 13, but there's a 14th house, and more kids there." "I don't." Wolf cut him off, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Don't lie. Don't play games. Don't waste my time." Rosa, 13 years old, told them about the bad house. The one where kids go when they cause trouble. "You know exactly where it is." Santo was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. "If I tell you, they'll kill me. My bosses, they've got reach everywhere. Prison, witness protection, it doesn't matter." Wolf leaned forward. "You're already dead, Santo. You just haven't figured that out yet. The FBI's got your operation. They've got 13 kids who'll testify. They've got Maria Santos, who knows everything. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell. The only question is whether you die in there as the guy who trafficked kids or as the guy who helped stop it. What's the difference?" "Prison has hierarchies," Wolf said quietly. "Men who hurt kids? They're at the bottom. Lower than snitches, lower than cops, lower than anything. They don't last long in general population. But men who help catch child traffickers? They're protected. By guards, by other inmates, by the system." Wolf let that sink in. "You've got information that could save lives right now. Today, you give us that address, and you become someone who helped. Someone who did the right thing at the end. That matters inside. That keeps you alive." Santo was trembling. "The house, it's not in Alamogordo. It's outside of town. Old property, used to be a ranch. 4521, Highway 82, about 15 miles south. There's 6 kids there. Maybe more now. They keep the fighters there, the ones who won't break easy. Break them worse." Wolf's vision tunneled. 6 more children. 6 more lives hanging in the balance. Who guards it? 2 guys. Raul and Eddie. They're armed. They've got orders too, Santos' voice broke. If cops show up, they're supposed to eliminate the inventory. Can't let them testify. Wolf stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to beat this man into paste. But that wouldn't save those 6 kids. "You just saved your own life," Wolf said flatly. "Whether you deserve it is another question." He climbed out of the van, where Rivera was waiting. 4521, Highway 82, 15 miles south. Old ranch property. 6 kids, maybe more. 2 armed guards with orders to kill the children if police raid. "We need to move fast and quiet." Rivera was already on his phone, pulling up maps, coordinating units. "We'll need tactical approach, probably go in at night." "We don't have time for night," Wolf interrupted. "Those kids are on borrowed time the second Santo doesn't check in. His bosses are going to know something's wrong. They'll move the kids or kill them. What are you suggesting?" "Let us go in first." Me and my brothers. We're not cops. We don't look like cops. We roll up, say Santos sent us for a transfer. Get eyes inside, get positions, then you breach. Rivera should have said no again. Should have followed protocol, done this by the book. But Wolf's plan made sense. And time was a luxury they didn't have. You get 10 minutes head start, Rivera said. You report positions, but you do not engage. You're not law enforcement. You're not authorized. We know what we're not, Reaper said, materializing beside Wolf. But we know what needs to be done. Sometimes that's enough. Rivera looked at these two bikers, one with a criminal record, one with gray in his beard and decades of hard living written on his face, and made a decision that would probably cost him his career if it went wrong. 10 minutes. Then we're coming in whether you're clear or not. The action before police. Highway 82 stretched south into the New Mexico desert like a ribbon of cracked asphalt melting into heat, shimmer, and emptiness. Wolf led the convoy of Iron Covenant bikes, 12 brothers following in tight formation, while Rivera's FBI team hung back out of sight, coordinating with state police and local SWAT. The old ranch appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Weathered buildings, collapsed fences, the skeleton of a windmill that hadn't turned in decades. One structure remained intact, a long, low building that might once have been a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Now it was a prison for children nobody was looking for. Two vehicles sat in front, a Ford pickup, dusty and dented, and a newer Dodge Charger that didn't fit the rundown aesthetic. Guards drove nice cars, Wolf noted. Blood money spent on chrome. The bikers slowed as they approached, Wolf raising his fist to signal formation shift. They needed to look like they belonged here, like Santos had sent them. Wolf and Reaper pulled up to the building first, killing their engines. The others fanned out casually, trying to look relaxed while cataloging exits, windows, sight lines. This was a combat patrol in everything but name. The door opened before they could knock. A man in his 30s, muscular, with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped out. Roll, Wolf guessed. His hand rested on the gun at his hip. Who the hell are you? Santos sent us, Wolf said, his voice flat, bored, like this was routine. Said he needed a transfer. 6 packages to the house on Desert View. Raul's eyes narrowed. Santos didn't call. Santos been busy dealing with some mama who thought she could run. Said to move these ones before there's more trouble. It was a calculated gamble. If Santos' organization knew about Maria's escape, this would sound plausible. If not, they were about to get shot. Raul's radio crackled on his belt. He unclipped it, keeping his eyes on Wolf. Eddie, you hear about any transfer? Static, then a voice. Negative. Santos' schedule doesn't show. Movement behind Raul. A small face appeared in the window. A girl, maybe 10, with huge dark eyes and a bruise across her cheek. She saw the bikers, and something like hope flickered across her features. Wolf made eye contact with her. Held it. Sent a message without words. We're here to help. Stay calm. Look, Reaper said, pulling a folded paper from his vest. A blank sheet. But Raul couldn't see that. Santos gave us this order 3 hours ago. You want to call him and confirm? Seems like a waste of time when those packages need moving now. Raul hesitated. The hierarchy of criminal organizations ran on fear. Fear of bosses, fear of mistakes, fear of questioning orders. If Santos had sent these bikers, disobeying would be bad. But if this was a setup, letting them in would be worse. The second guard, Eddie, emerged from the building. Younger, jittery, one hand on his weapon. Something's wrong. Santos always confirms transfers. Always. Wolf's hand moved slowly, carefully, toward his vest pocket. Every biker there understood what that meant. Things were about to go sideways. But before anyone could draw, a child's voice cut through the tension. Please help us. The girl in the window was crying now, her small hands pressed against the glass. Behind her, other faces appeared, 4, 5, 6 children, all watching these strangers with desperate hope. Raul spun toward the window, his face contorting with rage. Get away from there. That's when Wolf moved. 3 steps closed the distance between them. Wolf's right fist drove into Raul's solar plexus, folding him in half. Before Eddie could clear his weapon, Hammer was on him. Those concrete block hands wrapping around Eddie's wrist and twisting until something snapped and the gun clattered to the dirt. FBI. We're FBI, Wolf shouted, hoping the kids inside would understand. You're safe now. The other bikers swarmed the building, years of military training and street fighting creating a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the two guards in seconds. Raoul was on the ground, face down, with Wolf's knee in his back. Eddie was crying, his broken wrist cradled against his chest. Clear. Building secured. Reaper called out, his voice carrying across the desert. In the distance, engines roared to life. The FBI convoy moved in, covering the last mile in under 60 seconds. Wolf stood, letting local police take custody of Raoul. He moved toward the building, toward those small faces in the window. The door hung open. Inside was exactly what Wolf expected and somehow still worse than he'd imagined. A large room divided into smaller spaces by hanging blankets, mattresses on the floor, a bucket in the corner serving as a toilet. The smell of fear and unwashed bodies and desperation. 6 children stood clustered together in the center of the room, holding hands, their eyes huge with terror. The oldest was maybe 13, the youngest couldn't have been more than 7. Wolf stopped in the doorway, making himself small, non-threatening. Behind him, FBI agents were streaming in, professional and efficient, but he held up a hand. "Let me," he said quietly. Rivera nodded. Wolf walked slowly into the room, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. He lowered himself into a crouch, bringing his face level with the children's. "My name is Marcus," he said, his rough voice gentle. "But my friends call me Wolf. And I need you all to know something very important." 6 pairs of eyes stared at him. "You're safe now. Those bad men can't hurt you anymore. The FBI is here. The police are here. And me and my brothers." He gestured to the other bikers standing in the doorway. "We're here to make sure nothing bad happens to you ever again." The oldest girl, the one who'd appeared in the window, spoke in a whisper. "Are you really here to help? Or is this another trick?" Wolf's throat tightened. These children had been lied to so many times that rescue looked like another trap. "I promise you," Wolf said, and he meant it with every scarred, broken piece of himself. "This is not a trick. This is real. You're going home." "Home?" A small boy's voice cracked on the word. I don't remember where home is." Wolf felt something break inside his chest, that frozen thing that had started to thaw when he found Daniel. "Then we'll help you find it. Or we'll help you find a new one. But you're not staying here. Not one more second." The oldest girl took a tentative step forward. Then another. Then she was running, throwing herself at Wolf, her thin arms wrapping around his neck, her whole body shaking with sobs. The other children followed. Within seconds, Wolf was surrounded by 6 crying, clutching, desperate kids who'd just learned that hope was real and help had finally arrived. He held them all, this giant, scarred, tattooed man who society had written off as dangerous, and he cried with them. Behind him, he heard the other bikers sniffling, clearing their throats, trying to maintain their tough exteriors while watching the most vulnerable humans they'd ever seen finally feel safe. Agent Rivera approached slowly, respectfully. "Mr. Brennan, we need to process the children. Medical exams, documentation, connecting them with family services." Wolf nodded, gently untangling himself from the children. "Listen to me, all of you. These people are going to help you. They're going to ask questions, check to make sure you're healthy, find your families. It might be scary, but it's all to help you. You understand?" The children nodded, still clutching each other's hands. "And if you get scared, if you need someone who isn't official and professional, you ask for Wolf. Or any of these guys." He gestured to his brothers. "We'll be here. We're not leaving until we know you're all okay." As FBI agents carefully, kindly led the children out to waiting ambulances, Wolf stood in that empty prison and felt the weight of everything that had happened today crash over him. They'd saved 19 children. 19 lives that would have been destroyed, ended, forgotten. Because one mother had been brave enough to handcuff her son to a pipe. Because one biker had stopped at a rundown gas station and listened to a sound most people would have ignored. Because a brotherhood of men society feared had chosen to be what those children needed. Reaper's hand landed on Wolf's shoulder. "You did good, brother." Wolf shook his head. "We did good. All of us." "Yeah," Reaper agreed. "All of us." Police investigation and revelation. The FBI field office in Alamogordo had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered the walls, photographs pinned with red string connecting faces and locations. Agent Rivera stood at the center of the controlled chaos, coordinating with law enforcement agencies across 3 states. Wolf sat in a plastic chair in an interview room, giving his statement for the 3rd time to a young agent who looked like he'd just graduated from Quantico. The kid, Agent Morrison, was thorough. Wolf had to give him that, going over every detail of the day with careful precision. "So when you first heard the crying," Morrison said, pen poised over his notepad, "you immediately went to investigate." "Yes. Even though you were alone, in an unfamiliar location, with no idea what you might find." Wolf met the agent's eyes. "Would you have walked away?" Morrison paused, something flickering across his young face. No, I wouldn't have." "Then you understand." The interview wrapped up around 8 p.m., 4 hours after the raid on the ranch. Wolf emerged to find Reaper and several brothers waiting in the hall, drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine. "They keeping you overnight?" Reaper asked. "Nah. Rivera says I'm free to go, but he'd appreciate it if I stuck around for a few days. They've got more questions, and the kids," Wolf's voice caught. "Some of them are asking for us." Hammer, the massive sergeant-at-arms, wiped his eyes roughly. "These fed coffee is terrible, man. Making my eyes water." "Right," Doc said dryly, his own eyes red. "The coffee." Agent Rivera appeared at the end of the hallway, gesturing for Wolf. "Got something you need to see." Wolf followed him into a conference room where 2 other agents sat with files spread across the table. Rivera pulled up a chair for Wolf. "Maria Santos's debriefing has revealed something significant," Rivera began. "This operation, what Santo was running, it's bigger than we thought. Way bigger. The 3 houses in Alamogordo were just one node in a network that spans from Mexico to Canada. We're talking hundreds of children over the past 5 years. Maybe thousands." Wolf felt sick. "How is that possible?" One of the other agents, a woman with sharp eyes and graying hair who introduced herself as Special Agent Linda Zhao, pulled up a map on her laptop. "They recruit women like Maria, desperate, in debt, vulnerable. They start with small deliveries, ease them in, then reveal what's really being moved. By then, the women are complicit. Can't go to police without implicating themselves. Can't run without endangering their families. It's genius, in a horrifying way," Rivera continued. "The women become the couriers, the guards, sometimes even the recruiters. Nobody suspects mothers. Nobody looks twice at a woman traveling with kids. And the women are too scared to talk because they've been made accomplices." Maria broke that silence. Wolf said quietly. "She did," Zhao agreed. "And it's cracking the whole operation open. She's given us names, locations, financial records. Santos talking now too, trying to save himself. We've got arrest warrants being executed in 7 states right now. By morning, we'll have taken down the largest trafficking ring in the Southwest's history." Wolf should have felt triumph. But all he felt was exhausted rage at how many children had suffered while this machine kept grinding. "What happens to Maria?" he asked. Rivera and Zhao exchanged glances. "That's complicated," Rivera said. "Legally, she committed serious crimes. Conspiracy, accessory to kidnapping, child endangerment. The DA could charge her with dozens of felonies." "But," Wolf pressed. "But," Zhao said, "she also single-handedly brought down this network. Without her information, without her bravery in turning herself in, we'd still be stumbling around in the dark. She saved her son. She saved 19 other children. She's saving hundreds more right now with her testimony." Rivera leaned forward. "I've already spoken with the DA. We're recommending a plea deal, conspiracy charges in exchange for time served and probation. She'd have a record, but she wouldn't do serious time. And she'd get her son back." Wolf felt something ease in his chest. "She deserves that." "She does," Rivera agreed. "But here's the thing, Mr. Brennan. Maria's going to need support. Therapy, job training, housing. She's going to be rebuilding her life from nothing, with a traumatized 8-year-old son who just watched his mother handcuff him to a pipe. That's not a small thing." Wolf understood immediately what Rivera wasn't quite asking. "The Iron Covenant will help. We've got connections with shelters, therapists who work with trauma cases, jobs within the club network. Maria and Daniel won't be alone." "I was hoping you'd say that," Rivera said, a small smile cracking his professional exterior. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young female agent poked her head in. "Sir? The children are asking for him again." She looked at Wolf. "Specifically, they're asking for the Wolf man." Wolf stood. "Which ones?" All of them. The children had been taken to a facility run by New Mexico Child Protective Services, a modern building designed to be as non-threatening as possible with bright colors, comfortable furniture, and specially trained staff. When Wolf arrived with Reaper and Doc, they were led to a large common room where the 19 recovered children were gathered. Some were with social workers, giving statements. Others were with doctors, being examined. A few sat in corners, knees pulled to chests, eyes distant and haunted. But when Wolf walked in, several of them looked up. Recognition sparked. Hope bloomed. Daniel Santos sat in a chair by the window, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, his bandaged wrist resting on his lap. When he saw Wolf, his face transformed. "You came back," Daniel said, his voice stronger than it had been at the gas station. "Told you I would." Wolf knelt beside the boy's chair. "How's your wrist?" "Doctor said it'll heal. Gave me this." Daniel held up a small stuffed dinosaur. "Said I was brave." "You are brave. Bravest kid I've ever met." Rosa, the 13-year-old who'd told them about the ranch, approached slowly. "Did you really find everyone?" "All the kids from all the houses." "Yeah, we did. Every single one. Because of what I told you? About the bad house." Wolf met her eyes, this teenager who'd survived horrors that would break most adults. "Because you were brave enough to speak up when it mattered. You helped save lives today, Rosa. You're a hero." She burst into tears. Wolf pulled her into a careful hug. This child who'd been hurt so much that kindness felt foreign. More children approached. They didn't all want to talk, didn't all need conversation. Some just needed to be near someone who felt safe. Someone who'd proven they could be trusted. Wolf sat down on the floor, his back against the wall. Within minutes, children had gathered around him. Some sitting close, some just within sight. All of them slowly beginning to understand that the nightmare was over. A small boy, maybe 7, with serious eyes and a scar on his cheek, climbed into Wolf's lap. "Will the bad men come back?" he asked. "No," Wolf said firmly. "They're locked up. The police got them all. And even if they tried, they'd have to get through me and all my brothers first. You see those guys?" He pointed to where Reaper and Doc stood talking quietly with social workers. "They're here to make sure you're safe. All of you." "Why?" the boy asked. "Why do you care about us?" It was such a simple question, such a profound one. Wolf thought about 9-year-old Marcus, lying in a hospital bed, wishing someone cared. He thought about all the times he'd been invisible, forgotten, written off. He thought about the years he'd spent angry at a world that had failed him. "Because somebody should have cared about me when I was your age," Wolf said honestly. "And nobody did. I'm not going to let that happen to you." The boy nestled closer. Within minutes, he was asleep, the exhaustion of trauma finally catching up now that safety had arrived. Wolf sat there, this dangerous man with his scarred knuckles and prison tattoos, cradling a sleeping child while other children gathered close. And for the first time in his 37 years, Marcus Brennan felt like maybe his life had led exactly where it was supposed to. Maybe every beating he'd survived, every fight he'd won, every hard lesson he'd learned. Maybe it had all been preparing him for this moment. For these children. For finally being the person he'd needed when he was small and scared and alone. The rescue operation completion. The next 72 hours moved in a blur of coordinated law enforcement action across 7 states. With Maria's testimony and Santos' desperate cooperation, the FBI traced the trafficking network's roots from street-level recruiters all the way up to the organization's leadership, a family cartel operating out of Juarez, Mexico. Wolf stayed in Alamogordo, sleeping in a motel when he slept at all, spending most of his time at the CPS facility with the children. The Iron Covenant had set up a rotating watch, ensuring that at least 3 brothers were always present. It wasn't official, wasn't protocol, but Rivera had quietly authorized it after seeing how the children responded to the bikers' presence. On the 3rd day, Wolf received a call from Rivera. "We need you at the FBI office." Now, when Wolf arrived, he found Rivera in the conference room with a video conference call in progress. On the screen were faces Wolf didn't recognize, federal agents, prosecutors, people in suits who looked important. "Mr. Brennan," said a woman on the screen, introducing herself as Assistant Director Catherine Mills from FBI headquarters in D.C. "Your actions 3 days ago set in motion the largest human trafficking takedown in Bureau history. As of this morning, we've executed 127 arrest warrants across 7 states in Mexico. We've recovered 78 additional children. We've frozen $14 million in assets. And we've completely dismantled a network that's been operating for 8 years. Wolf didn't know what to say. That's good. Mills smiled slightly. It's better than good, Mr. Brennan. It's historic. And it wouldn't have happened without you stopping at that gas station. Without you listening to a child's crying. Without you having the courage to act before police arrived. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't, Rivera interjected. That's the point. You did. Mills continued. The Bureau would like to formally recognize your contribution. We'll be issuing a civilian commendation. But more importantly, we'd like to work with your organization, the Iron Covenant MC, on future cases. You've proven you have access to communities and situations we struggle to reach. Your assistance could save lives. Wolf glanced at Reaper, who'd been standing quietly in the corner. The old biker nodded slightly. We're not deputized, Wolf said carefully. We're not law enforcement. We won't become your informants or your tools. We don't want that, Mills assured him. We want partnership. When we have cases involving vulnerable populations, children, trafficking victims, domestic violence, we want to be able to call on you for assistance. You'd be consultants, properly compensated, with clear boundaries. You do what you do best. Connect with people who don't trust authority. We do what we do best. Bring legal consequences to criminals. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. A way to turn the Iron Covenant's outsider status into an asset. A way to keep saving lives. We'll consider it, Reaper said. Give us time to discuss with the full chapter. Fair enough. Mills's expression softened. Mr. Brennan, one more thing. Maria Santos has been asking to see you. She's in protective custody in Albuquerque. If you're willing, we can arrange transport. Wolf's throat tightened. Yeah, I'd like that. The meeting with Maria Santos happened in a secure facility in Albuquerque, a place that looked more like a hotel than a detention center. Maria sat in a small conference room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her eyes red from crying. She was younger than Wolf expected, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the weight of everything she carried. When Wolf entered, she stood immediately. You're him, the man who found Daniel. I am. Is he okay? Wolf sat across from her. He's going to be. Physically, he's healing. His wrist will be fine. Emotionally, Wolf paused. He's scared. He's confused. He doesn't understand why you left him. But he's safe. And he's alive. Because of you. Maria's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I handcuffed him there, someone good would find him before they could take him. Was I wrong? Did I hurt him more? Wolf thought carefully about his answer. You made an impossible choice. There was no right answer, only terrible options. You chose the one that kept your son alive and free. That took more courage than most people have. The FBI said I'm getting a plea deal, that I'll get Daniel back. You will. How can I face him? After what I did. After handcuffing him in that bathroom, leaving him crying, terrified. Wolf leaned forward. You tell him the truth. You tell him that you loved him so much you were willing to look like the bad guy if it meant he stayed safe. You tell him that mothers are warriors, and sometimes warriors have to make hard choices. And you tell him that you'll spend the rest of your life making it up to him. Maria wiped her eyes. You understand. I can hear it in your voice. You've been hurt before. Yeah, Wolf admitted. By people who were supposed to protect me. But here's the difference, Maria. You hurt Daniel to save him. That's not the same as hurting him because you were weak or cruel or didn't care. He'll understand that eventually. Kids are smart. They know the difference. They talked for an hour, Wolf listening as Maria poured out her story, the desperation, the debt, the slow realization of what she'd become part of, the terror when Santos said they wanted Daniel. She was broken, but not beyond repair. Damaged, but not destroyed. Before Wolf left, Maria grabbed his hand. Thank you. For protecting my son. For giving him hope. For being what I couldn't be in that moment. You were what he needed, Wolf corrected. You made the hardest choice a parent can make. That's not weakness. That's love. As Wolf rode back to Alamogordo, the desert sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and red, he thought about how many Marias there were out there. How many parents forced into impossible positions by desperation and predators. How many children caught in the crossfire of adult failures. The system had failed these kids. Society had failed them. But individuals, one biker, one brotherhood, one desperate mother, had saved them. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all anyone could do. Show up when it mattered, fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves, and hope that enough individual acts of courage could shift the world towards something better. Aftermath and community transformation. The story hit national news within days. Biker saves 19 children from trafficking ring, played on every major network. Wolf's face appeared in newspapers, on websites, in social media feeds across the country. CNN ran a special segment. Fox News interviewed trafficking experts about the scope of the problem. MSNBC did a deep dive into how motorcycle clubs were evolving to include community service. The Iron Covenant MC, previously known only in biker circles and law enforcement databases, became household names overnight. Their patch, a shield with crossed swords and a wolf's head, appeared on t-shirts sold online, with proceeds going to trafficking prevention charities. Social media exploded with hashtag #WolfTheHero and hashtag IronCovenantMC trending for days. Most of the coverage was positive. Stories about the bikers' criminal pasts were acknowledged but contextualized. Men who'd made mistakes now using those experiences to protect others. Human interest pieces focused on the children, on Maria's impossible choice, on the FBI's massive takedown of the trafficking network. But not everyone saw it that way. Conservative commentators questioned whether violent criminals should be celebrated, regardless of their actions. These are still gang members, one Fox News pundit declared, his face red with indignation. They've committed assault, drug offenses, weapons violations. One good deed doesn't erase a lifetime of criminality. Progressive voices raised different concerns about vigilante justice and whether bikers taking the law into their own hands set a dangerous precedent. We have systems for a reason, a sociology professor argued on NPR. What happens when these bikers decide someone is guilty who isn't? What happens when their intervention goes wrong? The criticism hurt more than Wolf expected. He'd spent his whole life not caring what people thought, wearing his outsider status like armor. But now, with children's lives in the balance, with partnerships and programs being built, the attacks felt personal. He watched one segment from his motel room in Alamogordo, Reaper beside him, both of them nursing beers and trying not to throw bottles at the television. These are still criminals, the talking head repeated, his expensive suit and perfect hair somehow making his judgment feel more legitimate. We can't valorize motorcycle gangs just because they did one good thing. What's next? Asking the Hells Angels to run our schools. Reaper muted the TV. Want me to respond? Set up an interview, tell our side. Wolf shook his head. Nah. Actions speak louder than talk shows. Let them debate. We'll keep doing the work. And the work intensified exponentially. Within 2 weeks of the rescue, the Iron Covenant received over 300 messages through their newly created website. Most were thank yous, messages of support, offers to donate. But buried among the praise were cries for help. Women escaping abusive partners, teenagers being sold by family members, children locked in basements by foster parents supposed to protect them. The Brotherhood couldn't ignore these calls. They partnered formally with the FBI and multiple state child protective services agencies, creating protocols for investigation and rescue that balanced their unique access with law enforcement's legal authority. They established a 24-hour hotline, staffed by members who'd been trained in trauma-informed communication. The phone number, 1-888 Iron Help, appeared in women's shelters, community centers, schools, and social service offices across the Southwest. Within 3 months, the hotline led to 12 more rescue operations. Small ones, not headline news, not viral stories, but each one was someone's entire world being saved. There was Emma, a 14-year-old in Tucson being sold by her stepfather to pay drug debts. The Iron Covenant coordinated with local police to extract her during what was supposed to be a transaction, resulting in 5 arrests and Emma placed with her grandmother in California. There was Miguel, a 10-year-old boy in El Paso locked in a closet for days at a time by his foster parents. An anonymous call to the hotline led to a welfare check that found him malnourished and covered in bruises. The foster parents were arrested, their license revoked, and their 3 other foster children removed and placed in safe homes. There was Christina, a 17-year-old in Phoenix whose boyfriend had started posting her pictures on escort websites. She'd called the hotline terrified, knowing he'd kill her if she left. The Iron Covenant worked with Phoenix PD to build a case against the boyfriend while moving Christina to a safe house 3 states away. The boyfriend got 15 years. Christina got her life back. Each rescue required coordination, planning, legal navigation. The Iron Covenant wasn't playing vigilante. They were filling gaps in a system that had too many holes, too few resources, and too many people falling through. Agent Rivera became their primary liaison, navigating the complex politics of federal law enforcement partnering with a motorcycle club. It wasn't easy. There were forms, protocols, background checks that several members couldn't pass. But Rivera fought for it because he'd seen the results. Your club has access to communities we can't reach, Rivera told Wolf during one of their weekly coordination meetings. People who don't trust cops, who won't talk to social workers, who've been failed by every system, they'll talk to you. That's not a weakness to exploit. It's a strength to harness. The town of Alamogordo, initially skeptical of the biker presence, slowly transformed. The local newspaper ran a feature, Hell's Angels or Guardian Angels. It documented the Iron Covenant's work with local schools, teaching kids about safety and consent, their donations to the local women's shelter, their weekly visits to the CPS facility where the rescued children were slowly healing. Wolf became a regular fixture at that facility. The children called him Uncle Wolf, and he didn't correct them. He taught them to work on motorcycles, gave them rides, with helmets and proper safety gear, and mostly just listened when they needed to talk about the nightmares that still came. Daniel Santos was placed back with his mother after 6 months of supervised reunification therapy. The reunion happened at the CPS facility, with Wolf present at both Maria's and Daniel's request. When mother and son saw each other again, the room went silent. Then Daniel was running, throwing himself into Maria's arms, both of them crying so hard no words were possible. Wolf stood back, giving them space, his own eyes stinging. Afterward, Maria approached him. I'll never be able to repay you. Don't want repayment, Wolf said. Just take care of your son. Be the mom he needs. That's enough. What will you do now? Now that the case is over. Wolf looked around the facility, at the other children still waiting for their happy endings. Stay busy. There's always someone who needs help. Rosa, the 13-year-old from the ranch, came to say goodbye when she was placed with a foster family in Colorado. She'd grown stronger over the months, participating in therapy, slowly rebuilding trust in the world. Will you visit? She asked Wolf. If you want me to. I do. You're the first man who ever kept a promise to me. Wolf hugged her carefully. Then I'll visit. You've got my word. The Iron Covenant held a ceremony 6 months after the rescue, honoring the 19 children and the mother who'd saved them all. Maria attended with Daniel, both still healing but noticeably stronger. The ceremony was simple. Just the club, the children who were able to attend, some FBI agents who'd become friends, and local community members who'd learned to see past the leather and patches. Reaper spoke first. 6 months ago, one man stopped at a gas station and heard a sound most people ignore. He chose to investigate. He chose to act. He chose courage over comfort. That choice saved 19 lives directly and 78 more indirectly. It dismantled a network of evil that had operated for years. It reminded us all that individual actions matter, that one person's courage can ripple out and change the world. He gestured to Wolf. Brother, you've honored this club and everything we stand for. You've proven that labels don't define us. Our actions do. Wolf stood, uncomfortable with the attention, but he'd learned over the months that sometimes you had to accept recognition to validate what mattered. I didn't do this alone, Wolf said, his rough voice carrying across the room. Every brother here helped. The FBI believed in us. Maria made the hardest choice a parent can make. And these kids, he looked at the children present. They survived things no one should have to survive. They're the real heroes. Daniel raised his hand, the scar on his wrist barely visible now. Can I say something? Reaper nodded. Daniel stood, small but brave. Before my mama handcuffed me to that pipe, I thought the world was scary and mean. I thought nobody cared about kids like me. But then Wolf found me. He listened. He helped. And he taught me that there are good people, even if they don't look like what you expect. The boy looked around the room. So I want to say thank you. To Wolf, to his brothers, to everyone who helped us. You showed us that family isn't just people who share blood. Family is people who show up when you need them. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Alamogordo Community Center buzzed with activity on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. The transformation from a sleepy, forgotten town to something resembling a community had been gradual but undeniable. Where once people had crossed the street to avoid strangers, now they gathered in public spaces, talking, connecting, building something that felt like hope. The Iron Covenant MC had sponsored a kids' safety fair, free workshops on stranger danger, self-defense basics appropriate for children, and most importantly, knowing when to ask for help. The event had drawn over 300 families from Alamogordo and surrounding towns, a turnout that had shocked even the optimistic organizers. Tables lined the community center's gymnasium, each staffed by different organizations. The local police department had a booth teaching bike safety. The fire department demonstrated stop, drop, and roll. The women's shelter offered information about healthy relationships. And in the center of it all, surrounded by children and their parents, stood the Iron Covenant. Wolf managed a table demonstrating basic motorcycle safety, surrounded by children eager to sit on his Harley, parked safely inside the gymnasium, engine off, with him holding each child secure. Their parents, once wary of the leather-clad bikers who'd invaded their town, now chatted easily with club members, asking questions, sharing stories, slowly learning that labels and appearances meant less than actions. "This is absolutely remarkable," said Officer Sarah Chun, who'd been first on scene at Lucky's Gas and Go that fateful day. She stood beside Wolf, watching a little girl in a princess dress pose on the motorcycle while her mother took photos. 6 months ago, if you'd told me Hell's Angels would be running children's safety programs, hosting community events, partnering with law enforcement, I'd have thought you were insane. Wolf smiled, a rare genuine expression that softened the hard edges of his face. People change when you give them a chance to, when you judge them on what they do instead of who they've been. You've changed this whole town, Chin continued. The crime rate is down. Domestic violence reports are up, which is good, means people feel safe enough to report it. 3 new community programs have started. The high school has a mentorship program where your club members volunteer. It's like you dropped a stone in still water and the ripples just keep spreading. She paused, her professional cop mask slipping for a moment to reveal genuine emotion. You gave people hope, Wolf. Not just the kids you saved, but everyone. You showed us that redemption is real, that people aren't just the worst thing they've ever done, that courage can come from the most unexpected places. Maria Santos approached with Daniel in tow, interrupting the moment but bringing their own kind of magic. The boy had transformed over the months from the terrified, broken child handcuffed to that pipe into something resembling a normal 8-year-old. He'd filled out, his face no longer gaunt, color returning to his cheeks. His eyes, once hollow with trauma, now held laughter and light, though careful observers could still see shadows lingering in quiet moments. He wore a small leather vest, a gift from the club on his 8th birthday last month, custom-made to fit his small frame. Across the back, careful stitching spelled out, Honorary Member, Iron Covenant MC, with a small wolf patch beneath. He wore it with pride that made his mother tear up every time she saw it. "Uncle Wolf," Daniel called out, his voice strong and clear, so different from the broken whisper in that bathroom. "Can I help with the motorcycle demonstrations?" "Sure thing, buddy." Wolf lifted Daniel onto the Harley's seat, settling him carefully, his large hands gentle on the boy's thin shoulders. "Remember what I taught you? Always check. The mirrors first, then the brakes, then the fuel gauge," Daniel recited perfectly, his small hands mimicking the motions Wolf had shown him. "And never, ever ride without a helmet and proper gear. And never ride alone until you're old enough and experienced enough." Wolf grinned. "That's my boy. Smart kid." Maria watched her son with eyes that perpetually shimmered with tears these days, but they were different tears from those months ago. Not terror, not despair, but gratitude and love and the overwhelming relief of having survived something that should have destroyed them both. She'd found work as a counselor at Safe Haven, Alamogordo's domestic violence shelter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A woman who'd helped trafficking operations now helping other women escape dangerous situations. But Maria brought something to the job that no degree could provide. The lived experience of impossible choices, of desperation, of knowing what it meant to sacrifice everything for your child's safety. The shelter's director had been skeptical at first when Maria applied, despite Rivera's strong recommendation and Wolf's personal endorsement. How can we trust someone who participated in trafficking children? The director had asked bluntly during Maria's interview. Maria's answer had been equally blunt. You can't. Trust has to be earned, and I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. But I can tell you this. I know what desperation looks like. I know what it sounds like when a woman is lying about being okay. I know the exact tone of voice someone uses when they're planning to go back to their abuser because they can't see any other option. I know because I've been there. I've lived it. And I can reach women you can't reach because they'll see themselves in me. They'll see that there's a way through, even when it looks impossible. She got the job. 6 months later, she'd helped 17 women escape dangerous situations, her own story giving them courage to seek help. How are you holding up? Wolf asked Maria quietly, keeping his voice low so Daniel wouldn't overhear. Maria's smile was tired but genuine. Good days and bad days. The nightmares are less frequent now. Daniel's therapist says he's making excellent progress. The PTSD symptoms are improving. And knowing that what we went through, the hell we survived, stopped it from happening to others. She paused, her voice thickening. That helps most of all. It makes the nightmare mean something. She looked at Wolf, this dangerous-looking man with his tattoos and scars and patch that society taught people to fear. You gave us our lives back, not just by finding Daniel, but by believing Maria deserved a second chance, that what I did to save him mattered more than what I did before. You saw me as human when I couldn't see myself that way. Wolf felt uncomfortable with the gratitude, the weight of being someone's hero when he'd spent so long being someone's nightmare. You saved Daniel. I just answered the door. You did more than that, Maria insisted. You fought for us. You protected us. You stood up to the FBI and the prosecutors and demanded they see the whole story, not just the crimes on paper. Daniel calls you Uncle Wolf, but you've been more of a father to him than anyone has in his entire life. The words hit Wolf harder than any punch ever had. Father, a word he'd never thought would apply to him. He'd spent his childhood with a father who abandoned him and a stepfather who tortured him. He'd sworn he'd never have kids of his own, convinced he'd either abandon them or become the monster he'd grown up with. But here was Daniel, calling him Uncle Wolf with genuine love in his voice. Here was this boy who chose to spend his Saturdays helping at community events when he could be playing video games or watching cartoons. Here was proof that maybe, just maybe, cycles could be broken. That being failed as a child didn't doom you to failing children in return. Agent Rivera appeared, no longer in his standard FBI suit, but wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt that made him look almost human, almost approachable. He'd become an unofficial liaison between law enforcement and the Iron Covenant over the past months, fascinated by the partnership and willing to fight through bureaucratic resistance to make it work. Got 3 new cases this week, Rivera told Wolf, his tone businesslike but tinged with the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing too much human evil. Different operations, different locations, but similar patterns to what Maria described. Women coerced into participating, children being moved as inventory, sophisticated networks hiding in plain sight. Las Cruces, Roswell, and Farmington. We could use the Covenant's help on all 3. We'll be there, Wolf promised without hesitation. Whatever you need. Rivera nodded, then his expression softened. You know, 6 months ago when Mills suggested partnering with a motorcycle club, I thought she'd lost her mind. Now, I can't imagine working these cases without you. You've changed how we approach human trafficking investigations across the entire Southwest region. Other field offices are asking about our protocols, wanting to replicate the partnership. Rosa appeared then, moving through the crowd with confidence that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. She was taller now, a growth spurt that her foster mother attributed to finally getting proper nutrition and feeling safe enough to thrive. She wore jeans and a t-shirt advertising her high school's volleyball team. Her hair, once matted and dull, now shone in a neat ponytail. Her eyes, once hollowed by trauma, now sparked with the intelligence and determination that had helped her survive. She'd moved to Albuquerque 2 months after the rescue, placed with foster parents who specialized in older children with trauma backgrounds. The placement had been rocky at first. Rosa didn't trust easily, didn't let people close, expected every kindness to hide a trap. But her foster mother, a former therapist named Patricia, had been patient. And slowly, carefully, Rosa had learned that safety could be real. Now she volunteered at Safe Haven, working alongside Maria, helping other teenagers escape dangerous situations. She was working toward her GED, planning to take classes at the community college in the fall. She wanted to be a social worker, to help kids like she'd been helped. Uncle Wolf, Rosa said. She'd started calling him that too, the honorary title spreading among all the rescued children like a badge of belonging. Can I borrow you for a minute? Wolf excused himself and followed Rosa to a quieter corner of the gymnasium, where a teenage boy stood nervously, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. This is Marcus, Rosa said gently, her hand on the boy's shoulder. He goes to my school. He needs help. Wolf recognized the signs immediately, the defensive posture, the visible bruises on the boy's arms, the way he flinched when someone moved too quickly nearby. Abuse. Probably at home. Probably ongoing. Wolf lowered himself into a crouch, making himself less intimidating despite his size. Marcus, my name is Wolf. Rosa says you need help. Is that true? The boy nodded, tears already streaming down his face. The story poured out in broken fragments. Stepfather who beat him, mother too scared to intervene, threats that if he told anyone it would get worse. The same story Wolf had lived. The same story too many children lived every single day. Okay, Wolf said, his voice calm and certain. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to get you somewhere safe today. Right now. Then we're going to make sure your stepfather can't hurt you anymore. You understand. But my mom. We'll help your mom too, if she wants help. But you first. You're the priority. Within 20 minutes, Wolf had contacted CPS, had an emergency placement arranged, had Officer Chin documenting Marcus's visible injuries. The stepfather would be arrested by end of day. Marcus would be safe by nightfall. As the social worker led Marcus away, the boy turned back. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Wolf's answer came from 37 years of hard-won wisdom. Because somebody should have helped me when I was your age. And nobody did. I'm not letting that happen to you. As the afternoon wound down and families began packing up to leave, as volunteers cleaned tables and folded chairs and swept floors, Wolf stood back and surveyed everything they built. The community center was covered in children's artwork, drawings of bikers as superheroes, crayon messages of thank you, construction paper badges proclaiming the Iron Covenant as real-life protectors. Parents who'd initially worried about motorcycle clubs in their town now volunteered for events, donated to causes, treated the bikers as neighbors rather than threats. The high school had started a mentorship program where club members met weekly with at-risk students, providing guidance and support and living proof that your past didn't define your future. Dropout rates had fallen. College enrollment had risen. Teachers reported students talking about possibilities instead of limitations. The local police department, once wary of the biker presence, now partnered on community outreach. Officer Chun had been promoted to detective, largely based on her work coordinating with the Iron Covenant on safety initiatives. Crime rates had dropped across the board, not because of enforcement, but because people finally felt invested in their community. Even the town's physical appearance had changed. Buildings that had been abandoned for years were being renovated. New businesses were opening. A coffee shop, a used bookstore, a community arts center. People painted their houses, planted gardens, fixed broken windows, and sagging porches. Pride had returned to a place that had forgotten it existed. Daniel ran up one final time before leaving with Maria, his small face flushed with excitement and exertion from a day spent playing and helping and feeling normal. Uncle Wolf, can I ask you something? Anything, buddy. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to help people who are scared and hurt. Is that okay? Wolf knelt down, bringing his scarred, tattooed face level with this beautiful, brave child who'd survived more at 8 years old than most people faced in a lifetime. You know what, Daniel? When I grow up, I want to be like you. Brave enough to ask for help when you need it. Strong enough to survive the worst and still choose kindness. Honest enough to talk about what hurts instead of hiding it. That's real courage. That's what heroes do. Daniel's face scrunched up, confused. But you saved me. You're the hero. We saved each other, Wolf corrected gently. Your mama was brave enough to do the impossible. You were brave enough to survive it. And that gave me the chance to finally be brave enough to do the right thing. Heroes aren't people who aren't scared. Heroes are people who are scared, but do it anyway. And buddy? You're the bravest person I know." Daniel hugged him fiercely, his thin arms barely reaching around Wolf's broad chest, his small body trusting in a way that made Wolf's throat tight with emotions he couldn't name. As Maria and Daniel walked away hand in hand, Wolf felt Reaper's familiar presence beside him. "Hell of a thing," the old biker said, his voice rough with age and cigarettes and unspoken emotion. "Starting from a crying kid in a filthy bathroom and ending up here. Community programs. Partnerships with the FBI. Kids calling you Uncle Wolf. Who would have guessed? It's not ended," Wolf corrected, watching more families filter out, children laughing, parents relaxed, community thriving. "This is just the beginning." And it was. The statistics told part of the story. The Iron Covenant's partnership with law enforcement had led to 37 rescue operations across the Southwest. 112 children recovered. 23 trafficking operations dismantled. Over 200 arrests. But numbers couldn't capture the real story. They couldn't capture the moment when Rosa smiled for the first time, genuinely smiled, 6 weeks after her rescue. They couldn't measure the weight lifted from Maria's shoulders when the court granted her custody of Daniel. They couldn't quantify the transformation in Alamogordo from a town that looked away to a community that looked out for each other. They couldn't show Daniel's nightmares slowly fading, replaced by dreams of ordinary things like dinosaurs and superheroes. They couldn't illustrate Marcus's stepfather being sentenced to 15 years, or Marcus thriving in a foster home that actually cared. They couldn't graph the hope returning to places that had forgotten what it felt like. The crying wolf had heard at that gas station 6 months ago had led him to Daniel. Daniel had led him to 19 children. Those 19 had led to 78 more. Those rescues had led to partnerships, programs, and a complete transformation of how law enforcement and community organizations approach trafficking cases across the entire Southwest. But more than numbers, more than statistics, the real change was in individual lives saved. In Daniel's laughter echoing through the community center. In Rosa's confidence as she helped other survivors. In Maria's redemption through helping women escape what she'd been part of. In the children who would never know how close they came to being taken because someone stopped it first. Wolf had spent 37 years as a victim of his own past, carrying rage like armor and pain like identity. But in one afternoon, by choosing to investigate a crying sound instead of ignoring it, he discovered something profound. Redemption wasn't about erasing your past. It was about using it to protect someone else's future. It was about being the person you needed when you were young and scared and alone. He'd been broken, hardened, damaged by a world that failed him. But those very scars had given him the strength to save others. His darkness had become light for children trapped in their own nightmares. As the sun set over Alamogordo, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Marcus Wolf Brennan climbed onto his Harley. The Iron Covenant patch on his back meant something different now, not just brotherhood and loyalty, but protection and purpose. He had somewhere to be tomorrow. Another call from Rivera about a child who needed help. Another chance to be the person he'd needed when he was 9 years old and no one came. The engine roared to life beneath him. That familiar rumble that meant freedom and purpose and the open road. But now it also meant something else. It meant hope. And as Wolf rode into the desert sunset, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected protectors are the ones the world has written off. Sometimes salvation comes from the places you least expect. Sometimes a crying child's voice cuts through everything else and reaches the one person capable of hearing it, understanding it, and fighting for it. Sometimes all it takes is one person choosing courage over comfort. One person stopping instead of passing by. One person believing that everyone deserves to be saved, even, especially, those whom society has forgotten. The road stretched endlessly before him, but Marcus Brennan was no longer running from his past. He was riding toward his purpose. And somewhere out there, right now, another child needed help. Another child was crying. And this time, Wolf would be listening. The end. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe. Tell others. Because awareness saves lives. And every person who learns to listen instead of ignoring might be the one who stops the next crying child and changes everything. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. And remember, be the person you needed when you were young. The world needs more people willing to stop, listen, and fight for those who can't fight for themselves. Until next time, ride safe. Look out for each other, and never ignore a cry for help.